Now I would like to invite Professor Szilveszter Póczik from the National Institute of Criminology to present his reflections on the subject.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Szilveszter Póczik. I am coming, as it has been told, from the National Institute of Criminology. This is the research center of the Chief Prosecutor's Office in Hungary. And at the same time, we are, I believe, the largest criminological research center in East Central Europe, with focus on empirical researches in victimization, crime control, and penal material and procedural law. My research, you can see here also my research fields. I hope I am not a cuckoo's egg in this company, as I'm not a lawyer, as the most people here, but social scientist. And my focus is on empirical researches too, but in minorities, minority protection, ethnical minorities, xenophobia, extremism, political violence, and also terrorism. In the period of 2018 and 19, I was invited in an international project or a research group for a research on vigilantism. This project was initiated by the Oslo University and the Czech University, as well as the Globsec Institute in Bratislava. The two leaders were Professor Tore Björgo, who is psychologist and professor at the Oslo University, and Miroslav Mareš, professor at the Masaryk University, Czech Republic. Our focus was on a comparative perspective, and we gathered contributions from all over the world, from Asia, Europe, and also America. And each study, these were national studies, each study examined the national social and political context, the purpose of vigilant organizations, their activity, their communication models, media strategy, and relationship to the main social actors and environments. Finally, we had 17 national studies. These were case studies, and two further studies were added moving on the theoretical level, and all that was published in 2019. Below you can see the accessation, also the internet links for this book. First of all, we tried to create a definition, a hypothesis definition. We told vigilantism is an organized civilian activity in a policing role without legal or authorization, and using or at least displaying violence, and claiming that the police or other homeland security agencies are unable or unwilling to handle against criminality or protect the citizens from that. It means it is a informal policing with the goal to maintain law and order. And vigilantism, as it is a challenge for the fundamental characteristic. For the state, and this is the connection point to this conference, and this is mainly the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force. We formulated three basic questions. What are the reasons, goals, and purposes of vigilant activism? Under what circumstances do vigilant activists emerge, flourish, and fail? And what is the vigilant group's relationship with the political parties, mainly authorities and the police? As a result, we could establish a general typology of vigilantism based on its goals. The first group, and in the first group, we gave organizations which has no political or social agenda. They have the only goal, or just the goal, to move or to act against believed criminals or believed criminal organizations. In the second group, we classified organizations which has or had a scientific, no, not scientific, a political motivation. We call that social group control vigilantism, and in this case, the violence directed against groups that are trying a redistribution of values with the system. Ethnic migrants, confessions, confessional groups, LGBT groups, as it has happened in Russia, and the last group was the regime control vigilantism, which has a very strict or well-framed political agenda. In many cases, left, but much more right-wing oriented. They use violence or trying to display violence by or against established groups to preserve or to change the status quo when the formal system of rule enforcement is viewed as ineffective. In the most cases, their political agenda is explicit and not implicit. On the next slide, you will see a general or usual justification given by a vigilant organization in Denmark. The core is that the state has broken the social contract with the citizens, is not able to protect them. That is why we as free citizens take the power into our hands, and because we have the right to protect ourselves. But at the moment when the state again is able or will be able to play a positive role against crime, then we are stepping back or will be step back. Asking about the manifestations or the modus operandi in vigilantism, we distinguished street patrols as it happened, for example, in Hungary against a perceived criminal group, namely the Roma, or they call it gypsy crime. Border patrols in the case of anti-migrational vigilant movements that is targeted against refugees or undocumented migrants. Undocumented migrants which are trying to cross the national borders, as we could hear, and some of them show a military organized form, uniforms, ranks, military training, etc. And as a separate group, which is not really a vigilant activism, is that we call it vigilant terrorism, doing pogroms, lynching, but it is, as told, not real vigilant activity, but much more a subtype of the terrorism. On the next slide, you will see the Hungarian Guard, which was acting between 2007 and 2009. As you see, this is in the first photo on the left is the inauguration ceremony. They are wearing quasi-military uniforms, which is very similar to the mid-war or interwar periods Hungarian Nazi movement. That was the Arrow Cross movement, and below that a march through a by Roma-dominated neighborhood that was a protest march against the so-called gypsy crime. And on the further photos you see these enthusiastic faces. The most of them were young men, but also some females, some ladies were had participated in this movement. After a longer procedure, this movement or this guard has been dissolved by the state in 2000 or by 2010. Our next question was or targeted the reaction of the political environment. It means the legal political parties, the civil societies, the NGOs, the state authorities, and particularly the police. It can be drawn or described as a scale from the toleration on the one hand and to the prohibition on the other hand, and between there is encouraging cooperation or other forms of reaction. And we know some cases, it is an extreme form, particularly from Latin America, when active policemen acted as in their leisure time as vigilantism. To the question of the connection or interlinkage between vigilantism and radical right, we stated that in the most cases, the radical right parties, which are moving or are within the legal frame of the state, they initiate, in some cases, vigilant movements or vigilant units. They have their own historical tradition and ideological tradition, which consists from nationalism, nativism, or a radical interpretation of law and order. And they deny, in some cases, or in the most cases, the democratic constitutional state, and prefer, instead of that, an authoritarian model of governmental order. And for the realization of that, at least on the theoretical level, they accept the usage of violence. To our next question, why can vigilantism emerge and flourish? We get the answer based on the studies that we have, and this is a globalized phenomenon. We have a general perception of the crisis that threats our society, our values, including our basic notions of the society, and some media or a relatively wide media coverage mirrors the far right or radical right position. It means there is a widespread threat because of the values, and there are also some very unpleasant personal experiences too, such as the New Year's Eve in 2015 in Cologne, when North African people, a mass of North African young men molested German women in the center of Cologne, and the police was uncertain. They didn't know what they should do, and there is a question whether they wanted to intervene. And at the end, many citizens believed that this police, this authority is not able, or much more, not willing to protect us. And also in Cologne, there were some, let's say, movements to create a vigilant answer, a vigilant reaction. Our further question was, what are the new dimensions in the last decades? And we experienced that the new organizations are very transformative. They show themselves as humanitarian organizations, sport organizations, etc. And in the most cases, they declare the willing and capability to cooperate with the state, with the authorities. And what is really new, that some organizations are trying to build up to build up subsidiaries in other countries. For example, the Odin Soldier coming out from Finland, and there is Odin Soldier in Canada, in the United States, and all Nordic states. And as an extreme case, I would like to mention the Russian attempt to instrumentalize some vigilant organization in foreign countries with the goal, with the aim to destabilize foreign countries. As a last side, or on the last side, I would like to mention that we in Hungary also have a, let's say, official vigilant organization. This is the Civil Guard, regulated by the law. And this law declares that creating and maintaining public safety and public order is a fundamental right of duty of the state. And this is practically a auxiliary and a supplementative police, but not really a police, but is under the control of police, and all organization of them. These are also from the bottom organized phenomena. They are obliged to undersign a cooperation agreement with the local police and with other authorities locally and on a state level. That was all what I wanted to tell you, partly in reaction to that, what we could hear from Dr. Flander. Thank you for your attention.